Depending on where you are, good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maria Birunji. It's my extreme pleasure to be moderating the webinar today. And today our discussion will focus on the case study developed by Wemos in collaboration with Afya and Haki, the Great Lakes Initiative for Human Rights and Development, and the Health Development Initiative. As you can see on the screens, there is an agenda. We shall be starting with a presentation from Antonio Perelli, who is part of the Access to Medicines team at Wemos. And as a global health advocate, he focuses on manufacturing capacity of medical products in Africa. After the presentation, we shall go on to the panelists who will each have 8 minutes to answer the questions at hand. As the webinar goes on, I ask participants to please put your questions in the chat box, and our panelists will answer them during the question and answer session. The session will also be recorded, and the recording will be shared after the event. Antonio, I invite you to make the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mary, for this introduction. Let me share my screen indeed. Okay, so let's start with this presentation. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much again for joining this conversation on regional manufacturing of health products. My name is Antonio Perelli. I'm a global health advocate at Wemos, which is an international civil society organization based in the Netherlands, advocating structural change to achieve global health justice. So today I'm happy to present a case study of BioNTech Africa mRNA facility in Rwanda that has been conducted in collaboration with 3 organizations. I would begin with a bit of background of the study, starting with some information on our partner organizations indeed. So as part of our research team, we have Afya and Haki, or Haki, an African research and training institution based in Uganda. Then we have Health Development Initiative, or HDI, an independent not-profit organization based in Rwanda. And last but not least, we have Great Lakes Initiative for Human Rights and Development, or GLIHD, a national public interest NGO registered and operating in Rwanda. So now we have a better understanding of the organization that conducted the research. We can move on to analyzing the actual context of the study. Well, in 2021, after COVID-19 exposed the unequal scramble of vaccines worldwide, a lot of initiatives flourished in the field of regional manufacturing. Some of them crystallized a political commitment, like the WHO 74.6 resolution and the Partnerships for African Vaccine Manufacturing. Some of them made more space for self-based regional manufacturing, like the mRNA Vaccine Technology Transfer Hub, the Medicines Patent Pool, and the COVID-19 Technology Access Pool. And other ones provided financial support to sustain supply, create demand, and build the overall enabling environment surrounding regional manufacturing, like Team Europe, MAV+. But these initiatives were not the only that we had on our radar. We noticed that biotechnology companies succeeding in developing and commercializing vaccines against COVID-19 were eager to expand their production to Africa, as witnessed by efforts coming from Moderna, now paused, and BioNTech. Such companies set what we could call, let's say, satellite production sites of large pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies that are located in a different place than the primary country of production. With our case study, we decided to follow closely the project that was launched by BioNTech, a German biotechnology company, to produce mRNA vaccines in Rwanda. But let's see why. In the first place, BioNTech had announced a quick rollout of doses, initially scheduled for 2022 and now postponed to 2025, with the first batch being produced for process validation. And also, we noticed a considerable amount of public funds involved, since Team Europe Initiative MAV+ invested around 94 million euros in Rwanda, and the German government and the European Investment Bank provided 475 million euros for research and development of COVID-19 vaccines, the same technology that will be manufactured in the facility in Kigali. Moreover, BioNTech announced an innovative approach for production offered by combat modules called biocontainers. All these elements together led us to consider the possibility of conducting a case study to understand whether BioNTech's initiative was able to enhance health equity, sovereignty, and self-reliance for Rwanda, but also East Africa and the African continent. As for the methods employed to collect data for our case study, we have adopted a qualitative approach through in-depth, semi-structured interviews, document review, and consulting experts on the occasion of a side event organized during the Second World Local Production Forum. Interviewees included stakeholders from the African continent, the European Union, and international organizations, as well as a representative from BioNTech itself. So, as for the content of the case study, I'm happy to present some key findings and recommendations stemming from the report. Of course, this should not be considered an exhaustive list, so please don't hesitate to check our full report for more detailed info. So, to start with, we have observed that the project sustains the production of active pharmaceutical ingredients in Africa, a much needed increment, considering the lack of initiatives going beyond just fill and finish operations. Also, the case study highlighted that while BioNTech integrally financed the facility in Rwanda, the enabling environment has been sustained by public funding coming from the Team Europe initiative MAF+, and these funds have been crucial for BioNTech to thrive. We've also observed a lack of information on pricing, distribution, and procurement strategies surrounding the final product. Another crucial element emerging from our work, and this is something that will consistently be mentioned during the interviews that we have carried out, is the concern around transfer of technology, knowledge, and know-how. The transfer is mostly happening within BioNTech and is indeed taking place from Germany to Rwanda, but still within BioNTech structures. African manufacturers are therefore cut off from the process. Also, the transfer of technology meaningfully targeting Rwanda is mostly limited to knowledge and happens within the academic sector. One more thing we also observe is that while we don't have other detailed information about the workforce, we know that the facility should be staffed by a Pan-African. As for the regulatory capacity, another relevant finding concerned the strengthening of the regulatory capacity in Rwanda. With the Rwanda FDA currently undergoing WHO benchmarking process to obtaining maturity level 3, a crucial milestone for pre-qualification and therefore vaccine export. And finally, we have also observed surrounding a potential handover of the facility in the future. The handover towards the Rwandan government and local manufacturers was suggested as a potential step of this project during the interviews, but it's not clear whether this could or not concretely take place in the future. So, based on these findings, what can be concluded in terms of recommendations? That's the big question we had. So, we have drafted both general, as a consequence, and general recommendations directed to relevant stakeholders in the space of regional manufacturing, and recommendations that are specific to the BioNTech Africa project in Rwanda. So let's start with the general ones. We concluded that when public funds are involved to sustain regional manufacturing of health products, conditions should follow and be attached. This condition must be established by public investors, met by private investors, and promoted by CSOs. Of course, when we talk about public investor, we include national governments, European Union, as well as the European Investment Bank, while private investor might include mostly biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies investing in regional manufacturing. But what are these conditions we are talking about? So the conditions mostly entail the transfer of technology, coherence with local epidemiological needs, and more ones that you can find once again in our case study. So, yeah. So as for the recommendation, there are specific BioNTech Africa. Some of them are directly addressed to BioNTech. For example, the transfer of technology emerged once again as a crucial tool to empower African manufacturers and allow them to build capacity for producing autonomously in the future. Still regarding the lack of technology transfer, another recommendation suggests that BioNTech should share technology and know-how with the WHO mRNA Vaccine Technology Transfer Hub to allow a scale-up of operation and of production and ensure an even more equal geographical distribution and allocation of vaccines. Our recommendations targeted, together with BioNTech, the Rwandan government and the African Union. Crafting a more inclusive decision-making model emerged as a key recommendation in the context of BioNTech Africa project. This includes decision concerning the value chain in full, from R&D to fill and finish processes. In the same vein, we can mention the importance of prioritizing epidemiological needs in coherence with the local, regional, and continental spheres. This necessitates the involvement, once again, of African decision makers, and not just a consultation, but a joint decision-making process. Other recommendations were addressed together with BioNTech, also to the Rwandan government again, but also to international procurers and international investors like Team Europe. A first recommendation suggests defining procurement and distribution strategies to better shape the market and anticipate demand. The same recommendation also suggests Gavi to take into consideration push incentives for the new instrument, the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator, as they can help emerging African manufacturers access the market. And finally, Team Europe and other international investors should invest more in initiatives that are likely to build more sovereignty and self-reliance for African countries, such as the WHO's mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub. These initiatives constitute a long-term sustainable solution to solve the lack of vaccine manufacturing in the global south. It must be financially sustained to ensure that the African continent is developing its autonomous production capacity. What we can conclude from this case study is that the BioNTech Africa facility, as well as other initiatives focused on regional production of health products in Africa, require well-defined strategies and firm commitments to attach conditions to public funding. As these initiatives concern public health, manufacturers should also be transparent about their plans and commitments. Governments, multilateral organizations, and global health funds can enforce transparency and help set conditions for better access in the future. It is therefore crucial to promote investments that privilege African public health over European industrial development. Keeping in mind that to be considered such, regional manufacturing should not only be carried out in the region, but also for and by the region. Thank you very much for your attention. And yes, feel free to reach out to my email address for any questions. And yeah, if you want to know more about our case study, please scan the QR code or visit our website. And thank you very much. And over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for your presentation. I will now be inviting the panelists to make their discussions on the case study that we have just listened to. First among them is Professor Petrota Blanche, who has a track record in a successful strategic management of technology-intensive organizations and the translation of research into innovation. Prior to her position as CEO of Afrigen Biologics, hosting the WHO MPP mRNA Vaccine Technology Transfer and Training Hub, she was the managing director of Pelchem SOC Limited, a high-technology fluorochemical production, sales, and distribution company. We also have Mr. Tom Mulisa, who is a lecturer of constitutional law, human rights law, and governance law at the School of Law of the University of Rwanda. He's the executive director of Great Lakes Initiative for Human Rights and Development, an organization working on public interest litigation, advocacy, and human rights monitoring in Rwanda. We are also joined by Dr. Aphrodis Kagaba, who is a physician and human rights activist with extensive knowledge of public health, health policy and advocacy, project management, HIV/AIDS, SRHR, and human rights. He serves as the executive director of Health Development Initiative Rwanda, an organization that promotes access to health and inclusive development for vulnerable communities. We are also privileged to be joined by Ms. Sharon Liu, who has worked for 25 years in the global health field. She is currently the co-director of the Center for Global Health Policy and Politics at Georgetown University's O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law. Last but not least, we are joined by Professor William Kabena Ampofo, who is the Chief Executive Officer, National Vaccine Institute in Ghana. which coordinates and oversees research, development, and manufacturing of vaccines in Ghana. According to the findings that have been presented by Antonio, I would like to invite Professor Petro to give us her thoughts on the findings.
Maria and the Wemos team and the consortium, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment, and to all the participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me make a few comments. Firstly, we welcome the involvement of civil society organizations and consortia that has so much access and equity at heart. And I think that's the one comment I want to make. The report is quite comprehensive. If you read it, it touches on all the critical issues around an ecosystem that will support the vision for Africa, the Africa we want in 2040 to at least produce 60% of the vaccines we needed. So thank you to this consortium and the team for highlighting issues and for unpacking this as a beautiful case study, I actually think, for the continent. But let me take a step back, and I want to have a long-range vision, which I want to share with you, and I think it's very pertinent to the developments of BioNTech as a partner for the continent. If we look 20 years ago, and we look at the top 10 blockbuster medical products, the top 10 was dominated by small molecules. In the last 10, 15 years, that balance have shifted towards biologics and monoclonal antibodies, where these now dominates 8 of the 10. I believe that mRNA as a platform, not only for preventative and prophylactic vaccines, but mostly for therapeutics, will and carries the promise to be a future blockbuster, dominate the blockbuster landscape. So it is important for Africa to have a seat at that table, because that is the future of public health impact, but also a lucrative and sustainable sector that could be sustained on the continent. And there are many models for us to reach that, for us to be at the table and have a seat at that mRNA table. And there are many models. I'm going to mention 3. First one is this model, a model where a successful international company with intellectual property, with established platforms, with a pipeline of products which many are relevant for the continent, platform technology, makes a decision to establish a footprint on the continent. That's one model. And through that, also make accessible these products to the African continent and contribute to the balance of trade, balance to job creation, contribute to job creation, to innovation, and to products into the African market. So I think that's one model. The second model is the African model, the mRNA, WHO mRNA program model, which is we're going to develop everything homegrown. We're going to build the model in South Africa. We're going to build the platforms. We're going to share this platform with 5 partners on the continent. This is a network model. We will innovate and we will prioritize products of importance to Africa. That's a second model. And the third model is probably hybrid. It's a combination, and this is more or less what IPD is doing. So I do believe there's a great need for these different models on the continent for us to truly benefit from the promise that mRNA technology can bring to the continent. The other point that I want to make is the challenges that BioNTech faces, although it comes in with established technology and with a route to market for a pipeline, are not different from Afrigen and Biovac and Aspen and Biovaccines and Biovacs, unless there's an ecosystem created that will enable us from a regulatory perspective, a finance perspective, market reshaping, de-risking these initiatives. Our challenges are all the same. So therefore, our opportunities are also the same. And I believe that the support from public funds to de-risk some of these initiatives in the early stages, which is happening with BioNTech and it's happening with the mRNA program, is essential for us to establish these capabilities. In terms of the comments in the report, and again, I enjoyed reading the report. I really want to congratulate the team for having an objective, wide view on this. Is BioNTech, why not sharing technology and do a tech transfer to Afrigen? In 2021, when we started up Greenfields, it was very important for us. We've moved on, and I think where we are now, there's room for collaboration. So I believe that down the line in the next few years, there will be a collaboration developing between the mRNA entities like the mRNA, the WHO hub here in South Africa, and some of the partners, Biogenerics, Pharma in Egypt, IPD, Kenya, Nigeria, BioVac, that there will be partnerships that will develop with BioNTech, where we will also jointly innovate, we will do joint product development, and we will share also the markets. I really are optimistic that that will happen, because the engagement between BioNTech and us on an informal basis at these scientific conferences are very cordial, and it's brought together by science. You know, BioNTech is led by scientists, so is Afrigen led by scientists. So there's a deep understanding. So you get my sense that I have a positive orientation to this development. I think it's one of three models that's important. I think there's opportunities for collaboration. We face the same challenges. We have a window of opportunities, which is phenomenal, and we should seize that together and building the sector for the continent. So I think that's my opening remarks. I'm happy to engage and answer other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, indeed, Professor Terblanche. Thank you very much for this this reaction to the case study, but also a little bit of an overview of the potential approaches and the avenues for the future of mRNA vaccines in the African continent. I do see that our moderator lost the connection with our Zoom call, so I will probably continue for now. Yes, so let me check. I would ask the same question at this point to Dr. Tom Mulisa as well, and I would ask him his first impression about the case study and to react to the case study itself, and if he wants to articulate more on his own perspective and standpoint on mRNA production in Africa. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Antonio. I think I wouldn't talk much because I was part of the team. I was part of the team, and what I could be talking about much is included in the study. I was part of the team on the ground here, and I was part of the team that was doing the interviews. So I wouldn't be talking much different from what is in the report. But I think one important thing that I should talk about with the findings that the report highlights that BioNTech Africa production site in Rwanda is designed to enhance regional self-reliance in vaccine manufacturing. And all the partners we visited, everyone was quite happy that this should be happening even elsewhere in Africa. And I think, as you can see, the site in Rwanda here is structured to support the vaccine production within Africa, addressing the pressing need for the local manufacturing capabilities, of course, to reduce dependency. And another thing, one should note that the financial model underpinning the BioNTech Africa includes significant investments to develop a skilled local workforce and ensure technology transfer. But also, because as a lawyer, looking at this perspective and coming in as a lawyer dealing with the law and health, there was also something clear that there is need for more cohesive policies to align with the local, regional, and continental epidemiological needs. The current framework, particularly here in Rwanda, is insufficient. It's sufficiently coordinated with other vaccine manufacturing initiatives on the continent, potentially leading to some inefficiencies and overlapping efforts. So I thought that March, it's a new initiative that should be applauded. there is also need also to look into the regulatory and policy framework in Rwanda to have one in place. There's need for that. And also not only having one in place, but also how could this
I think we are experiencing some connectivity issues as well. Let's see. I think we are losing the connection with Dr. Tom.
You've spoken people you came across underscores the role of civil society organizations also. Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now.
I can hear you. Yeah. So on the recommendations, much came out with regard to technology transfer, intellectual technology transfer to the local manufacturers. There was also a recommendation on establishment of a transparent pricing policies, and inclusion of local entities in decision-making processes for the entire chain. I don't know whether that's possible, to ensure that the local health needs are adequately met. That is for those who are working with the local communities. How that's possible, I don't know. And last, I will talk about what was mentioned of the role of the civil society also in participating at such stages, decision-making processes, but also ensuring also accountability and transparency in most of the processes. So I think, very brief, that's what I'll talk about with regard to the findings and the recommendations. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tom. And I would ask at this point to Dr. Aflodis Kagaba as well to jump in conversation and react have a first reaction to the case study itself. And over to you, Dr. Kagaba.
Yeah, thank you so much, Antonio. I guess if my connection gets slower, I'll move the video. Just a few things have been said, and I'll be brief in my submissions. One, having been part of this process to carry out the case study, I want to applaud everyone who participated, because it came at the right time. It's timely and captures the need for the initiative, but while also being able to highlight the existing gaps, which I believe it's not too late to address them. And if well addressed, of course, the initiative and the regional manufacturing in Rwanda, which of course would give some kind of inspiration to other countries to see how this technology and vaccine production can happen in Africa, having seen the challenges that went through with COVID-19. So I think that the fact that this case study has come is really a very good step towards addressing, but also informing what are the next steps. Some of my reflections on what we did find out. First of all, I was very surprised at how much information was just in documents, and the key stakeholders are not aware. I think in the process, it was really very hard for us to get the needed information. There are some key stakeholders you would think that they have access to the information, but they didn't have. Some of them, of course, would even openly express to have the access to information. So the fact that the process is so advanced, we are even to the level of starting to do the production, but very important key stakeholders are not aware. That was for me a very important finding that we would use to see how would we address similar gaps in the future. Also, the lack of transparency. I mean, people involved know how difficult it was even to get the information, even from those that had the information. And I think all this should be part, in the future, they should be part of the broader framework to ensure that any kind of initiative that happens has everything well captured, including, of course, the framework, the involvement of stakeholders, because I think if it's done very well, then it becomes community-centered, and it's only if that is respected that we can ensure that the needs of our communities, the public health needs of our communities, the local needs are taken into consideration. Because here we are looking at partnership between companies, to say an Europe-based company, and our governments. So we have to ensure that really the needs of the people, which is the intention. Because a lot of questions we were asking around what would be the prices. We're also finding out that some of the things were not thought through in the process. And I think looking at the case study and the very good recommendations, the next job is going to be how we continue to share them with all the concerned stakeholders and see how willing the BioNTech and the government of Rwanda, but also other institutions that are involved, are willing to take forward the recommendations to address the gaps. So I'm very excited about this, and I think I want to thank everyone who was involved. So for me, it creates more opportunities for us to engage and see how we can advocate to ensure that the existing gaps, the rights of the communities we want to serve, the lack of information and transparent strategies around the health products that we want to produce and how they're going to be accessible is going to be addressed during the process. So I look forward to engaging, and I think this case study for me is going to open additional work for us to ensure that from this current case study, but also other partnerships that happen, they really address and take into consideration everything that we have found at the gap in this case study. So I want to thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Dr. Kagaba. And I would therefore proceed with the same question, asking her first thoughts to Sharon as well. Please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this report and the work that went into it. There is so much in the local manufacturing space that is a black box. So the fact that you were able to shine a light and even to say that there's more transparency needed is incredibly important. So obviously this is not the first time that localization is used to benefit a company in trade. So the Chinese factories in Lesotho are there not to boost the local economy, but to avail themselves of trade privileges that they wouldn't be able to receive otherwise. So this isn't really very different. The question is, in the rush to applaud localization, can we be a bit nuanced in terms of localization versus locally owned? And that's why your report is so important. I just want to say UNIDAID carried out a mapping of registered manufacturing sites in Africa, and eventually came not only to the fact that many were fill and finish, secondary manufacturing, many were CMOs, so operating in manufacturing based on, because they're contract manufacturers of international, and then indeed come down to the bottom of the cascade, the pyramid, to the number that are actually African owned. So that report should be publicly available. Obviously, we need to engage some of the global health actors that rightly are thinking about the incentive structure, that are thinking about premium prices, are thinking about milestone payments for quality assurance, for example, in WHO pre-qualification, and are thinking about fast tracking of approval processes at WHO pre-qual for manufacturers that are based in Africa, so that we can add a few things, right? Add the fact that, and the sort of criteria that they be co-owned or owned outright, that the manufacturing be more than just the fill and finish, obviously. So that's work to be done. And I hope that Wemos and some of the other authors, those that took part in the report, can help define those. because we can't leave, it's obviously linked to the conditions conversation, where we need to craft the set of principles, where we need to score as civil society and those from academia, how manufacturers go against that, so that we can then go to the global health actors and others and say, wait, hold on a minute. We have yet to have them reach 4 out of the 8 principles or conditions. And that should include everything from, what is stated in the report to reporting on the proportion of expat versus local staff, which you mentioned. And there certainly are other companies that do that, such as Universal Corporation Limited in Nairobi. So already there are some strikes against the company, as stated, first and foremost, that they refuse to share tech transfer with WHO and the mRNA tech transfer hub. But also, we can't just have all of Africa treated as a bolus of infectious disease, as opposed to a population that has comprehensive needs. So there are so many comprehensive health needs. So there are so many manufacturers that I'm talking to, and of course they want a sure thing. So they want to invest in HIV. Of course, how many HIV rapid diagnostic tests do we need? They want a big market. Okay, I get it. Commercial sustainability. Totally. Absolutely. But at the same time, can we look at BioNTech and their portfolio and what's on their pipeline? There's an awful lot of oncology products there. Are we going to continue to pretend and focus just on demanding and engaging with manufacturers only about the ATM, AIDS, TB, and malaria? When obviously, and I hope Rwanda and African Union and civil society, when we engage with this company, that will insist on so much more. So I'll add more comments about conditionalities when we get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon, for those reflections. We would also like to hear from Professor William. What are your reflections on the report?
Well, just like the other speakers, I must commend your group. Civil society has done a wonderful job in bringing out, the equity issues. This BioNTech, project is supposed to be a flagship for vaccine equity for Africa. At the launch in Marburg, we had 3 heads of state there, including the head of state of Ghana, because it was initially announced as a tripartite between Rwanda, Ghana, Senegal, and BioNTech. And fast forward the inauguration of the BioNTech facility in December, I was actually, present. So it was another milestone in this, vaccine equity project. But your case study has shown that, there are some, major issues that need to be also discussed, so that the actual equity and tech transfer, does occur to the benefit of the continent. As Petro has pointed out, mRNA technology is a new, rapidly advancing, exciting field, and we felt that this BioNTech project is one model, as Petro pointed out, with the African project another, and then also Institute Pasteur. Also, then the other, vaccine manufacturing projects across Africa, that the African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative that I represent is encouraging, and our members are also very eager to have partnerships with big pharma from the globe. And one thing also mentioned in this case study is the wonderful support from Team Europe, the MAF Plus, funding, which you rightly pointed out is public money. It is very important, as the case study has shown, that there needs to be an analysis of what is going on, and the recommendations are in order to help us see what approach and what would be the benefit in the long run to the country that is hosting this partnership, and also the main goal of making vaccines available for the continent, whether for routine or for pandemic or outbreak, and then also the tech transfer to Africa that will accompany this endeavor. I should mention that the case study is also quite opportune. I mean, the timing is right, because recently member states organized had a meeting organized by Africa CDC, and the emphasis was that member states should be choosing to buy vaccines that are made in Africa. So as the last speaker just pointed out, it's not just about being made in Africa to satisfy, some of the new conditions like AFMA, but that there should actually be genuine and transparent tech transfer that will enable us to also develop the capacity to make vaccines in Africa. I think that's enough for me at this stage. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Professor William. I will now be directing questions to each of the panelists. I would like to start with Professor Terblanche. Professor, you alluded to the benefits of technology transfer between the Global North and Global South. Do you think in the current BioNTech environment, and is this a possibility? And how would this actually enable increase of capacity for local vaccine manufacturing?
Thank you. I believe that, in a broader scheme, that technology transfer is one of the very critical, important activities that we need to enable on the continent. And this is not only mRNA. We're now talking mRNA, but I think for other platforms, for the continent to reach our goals, we will have to engage with partnerships that will result in technology transfer. But that also means that we have to be ready to receive technology. Now, technology transfer cannot happen in a vacuum. And I always say to my people, technology travels on two legs. It walks, it's people. So we need to be able to receive that. If and I can't speak for BioNTech, and of course, I want to make a comment about the report. There are aspects in the report that I think for BioNTech would be important inputs to their future strategies, and I hope that they will read the report also in that context. But for BioNTech, they, in a way, are transferring their own technology into an entity that they own on the African continent. That entity in their mind will then provide products, and my understanding is this will not only be prophylactic vaccines, but also therapeutic, which means that in the cancer space, and that will be quite beneficial for the continent. From a technology transfer, for example, for the continent to receive technology transfer for mRNA therapeutics to another center on the continent could be very, very valuable. And that's a conversation that I think one could have in a trust environment where technology transfer can happen. So yes, very critical. We have to look for the partnerships that will inbound transfer technology for specific future relevant technologies and products into the continent to build to the portfolio of products that we need to make the industry on the continent sustainable, financially sustainable, but also contribute to public health. Maria, I want to take a quick step back and maybe make a comment on a very important point that Sharon made. And that's the point around full finish versus the backward integration. Now, full finish was the springboard, but that we cannot settle on that only. If we do the basic multipliers, socioeconomic multipliers for the sector to develop, unless we go backwards to end from the drug substance, in fact, end-to-end research, development, and manufacturing, drug substance and drug product, we will not see the multipliers. And we will also not have self-sufficiency and equity and access, because the actual drug product will be controlled outside of the continent, and the true value will not be captured on the continent. So I hope what BioNTech is going to do is end-to-end. That's our understanding from the communications. And, the CEPI support that was announced 2 weeks ago that will also further facilitate their financial investments to also be there for pandemic preparedness, I think is quite positive. But we need more than these on the continent. We also need those support for the homegrown entities on the continent. So I hope I'll answer your question, but in short, tech transfer critical for our journey to where we want to be.
Thank you so much for those reflections. I would like to move on to Tom. Tom, as one of the representatives of the organizations that was heavily involved in the data collection, what is the feeling in Rwanda? Is there a feeling that this BioNTech facility will actually benefit Rwandans and is actually helping to build capacity, or is the feeling that it's mainly being carried out by North-based companies?
Yes, thank you very much, Birungi. I think, as mentioned by my colleague Dr. Frodis, you'll find two versions of BioNTech and the local production. So when you meet the local suppliers or some local manufacturers, you may find that some of them are informed of what BioNTech is doing and what BioNTech is here to assist the people of Rwanda. But when you move out of the capital and talk to other local suppliers or some other people who are involved within the chain, the whole chain, you'll find that they have no information basically about what BioNTech is here to deliver to the common Rwandan person. But when you look at when you are talking to the institutions, let's say institutions that are working closely with the government, they are very much aware that that the benefits that BioNTech is going to bring, enhancing health equity. They talk about production capabilities, Rwanda to reduce dependence on external supplies and increase access to essential medicines. They talk about the access with BioNTech will play in addressing public health needs. But then there is a gap. There is a gap between not only the government and the partners, and then those who will be involved, let's say local suppliers and local manufacturers, very few local manufacturers, in understanding exactly what BioNTech would be delivering. As my colleague was speaking earlier, when we asked, we had a question that we put all government institutions that were related to BioNTech, or asking the question on how the vaccine is going to be able to arrive or to reach Rwanda's rural population. I'm not very sure whether anyone responded to that. They told us it's a trial, and they told us they are yet to see. It's a trial. They are yet to see how that is going to come out. So this gives you that perhaps one needs to understand more this whole chain. But I think that an engagement of the local initiatives, engaging local companies, and engaging more local actors will shed more light on how important and fruitful BioNTech is going to be. Some questions were not answered with regard to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Dr. Kagaba, building on Tom's submission of where there is a lack of general knowledge about the ongoings of the BioNTech facility, what role can civil society continuously play to make sure that public health concerns remain a priority?
Yeah, thank you so much. Of course, civil society is a critical player. I mean, one of the roles is being able to do this kind of case study that is able to capture where are we. First of all, let me say that as I earlier highlighted, the process, if you look at the initial framework, is supposed to have gone faster than it has gone, but also we're very impressed at how far things have moved. But if the civil society is not there to push for accountability, to ensure community literacy on what is happening, to give feedback on the products, because eventually the health products, we expect the vaccines are going to be consumed by the citizens. So if they are not involved and they're not aware, it may end up, of course, tilting towards the economic benefits that can be invested by the investors. But civil society has a key role to ensure that there is community awareness, there is accountability and transparency, to ensure that all stakeholders are aware and playing their part, and ensure that eventually the initial benefits of ensuring health equity is reached. Having said that, I look at it as a good initiative that we have to step in and see what has been done and what are the existing gaps. Because when we see what has happened in the past few years, 1 or 2 years, a lot has happened. I mean, to touch on even the legal framework, how much has happened is quite amazing. It could even trigger other initiatives beyond BioNTech, because we didn't know that we didn't have the policies. We didn't have the legal framework. We go to RFDA, which is the agency, one of the agencies in charge of drugs. There's a lot happening in terms of, I think Antonio touched on it, the WHO purification. It's a lot of process. Some people have been hired, but we have to ensure that all this is happening for the benefit, and I think that's where the civil society comes in, for the benefit of the citizens. So things like pricing, what would be the final cost of the product, of the vaccine, towards the person who's going to use it. That's very, very interesting. And I think civil society needs to be involved, needs to ensure that whatever happens, we are not only a ground for production, for producing vaccines, but we are really producing vaccines that are affordable, that can ensure to ensure health equity, that the production of the vaccines is really more centering the needs, the local needs of the communities in Africa. And I think that comes back to civil society, so that all those that are involved with the key players, because we have the private sector, we have the government, and I think I have no doubt that the recommendations moving forward and ensuring that we push for their implementation. But of course, there's a lot of advocacy work to be done. Then civil society need to be contributing to, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kagaba, for these reflections. I would like to remind all attendees and participants to please use the chat box to forward your questions, and the participants will answer them in the next session. This next question goes out to Sharonan, as the findings indicate that a great quantity of public health funds have actually been used to develop the policy and legal environment for Rwanda. How can we make sure that these public funds continuously align with global health priorities?
Thank you so much for the question. So a few things to say. One, just an acknowledgement that BioNTech has received other public funding, even if from secondary sources. And in the case of CEPI, for example, so they're eligible for up to $145 million from CEPI. CEPI is itself funded with a mix of philanthropic and public funding. So there's even more reason then to develop and push conditions. And in terms of conditions, there's, the sort of financing ones that Wemos has noted, particularly around infrastructure, the CapEx for infrastructure, then the upstream for the R&D, and as well the downstream. So purchasing any products that are that come out of here should also have a contract that includes conditions. And just to recognize that the norms around access and conditions are changing. So obviously this has been a multi-decade effort, but it is like water wearing down rocks, where there are new norms, new benchmarks, and benchmarks that we can consider scaffolding in which to climb higher. It used to be obviously that we were laughed out of the room when we would talk about some of these access conditions. And so things have changed a bit and there's some momentum. So the NIH in the US has recently proposed guidelines for licenses and intramural inventions. There are cases where Regeneron has international reference pricing clauses for monoclonal antibodies for COVID. Some people consider that's a bad idea. Some people welcome them. There are CEPI agreements that include public health licenses, unit agreements that require a voluntary license to a pooled mechanism, and several recent commitments by the US. But this is and what Wemos is looking at, along with its allies, is very much needed and new, and should be bundled into a code of conduct, and then, as I mentioned, scored. And I would add and emphasize, as Petra emphasized, that backward integration that is essential. So the investment needed for the backward integration, advancing more than just fill and finish. I think we should be creative about what conditions, what practices, in addition to what is here in the Wemos report, could contribute to commercial sustainability, because we know that and access to markets is key, and it's where we risk seeing failure. So, and perhaps that could include the type of coordination. Afrogen and BioNTech are both embarking on the TB vaccine, the mRNA TB vaccine. So let's make sure there's not overlap. Let's make sure that the cookie is cut in terms of procurement for both. BioNTech could also be compelled to have another container and to lease that out to the Rwandan government or to other public sector or other local, not to compete necessarily, but to make other products that aren't considered priorities for BioNTech. And then there's the Africa pool procurement mechanism. So BioNTech can say, yes, we will use that mechanism. And frankly, any multinational corporation, any corporation that is not owned in Africa should have to pay a tax. And let's say if that tax, because you're getting the benefit of using the pooled procurement mechanism, could go to help pay for the medium enterprises that need cash for quality assurance work. And here I mean more the small molecule drugs, the LFAs and other rapid diagnostic tests. They need cash for quality assurance related costs. So call it the Kigali Code. This is essentially appropriation of a different sort, where, we've seen many groups go to some city in Africa and say, oh, we have made a code, we've made a set of principles. This is appropriation of a different sort, with African Tech going and opening up a plant, BioNTech. I think that this code should be developed by civil society and academics in Africa and pushed by those groups. And those of us from outside the region can help boost in whatever way we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharonan, for those reflections. With a great deal of funding coming from the global north, how can we make sure that Africa actually becomes self-sustainable regarding pharmaceutical manufacturing?
We need to, for the money that is coming in, it needs to be used well to prop up some of the missing enablers. So that could be anything from supporting the development of smart industrial policies. That could and should include developing an incentive structure that could help cover the cost of quality assurance, as well as, why not give a cash prize, for crying out loud, for any national government that requires, what used to be referred to as SDRA, but level 2, level 3 classification now of drug regulatory authorities. There's a lot that is still missing in this picture. Also, there's a need for a kind of hub or a facility, frankly, that can provide the necessary market intel beyond vaccines for diagnostics, for small molecule drugs. Manufacturers don't want to jump over a cliff and not be assured of a market. They need market intel. If you had a facility that was focused on truly supporting, spurring, and sustaining local production, they would provide that market intel. Another missing enabler is a marketplace, and perhaps, you know, one of the existing pool procurement mechanisms could be that, which is a marketplace for APIs and raw materials. Again, across the board, diagnostics, small molecule drugs, and some of the vaccine tech where we need, and others, and biologics where we need to all go. Access to raw materials and APIs is very difficult, and what we hear from manufacturers. The final point, and then I'm going to back off, is in terms of blended finance. So you've got huge development banks and manufacturers who need money, except there's a misalignment in terms of what's called the ticket sizes. So we need an intermediary that can translate these big ticket sizes of the loans into something smaller. It's like, fine, if you're not going to change your business model in order to complete this mission that you now talk about for the last 5 years in terms of local production, then at least help us build something that will, that is in the region, run by the region, that can translate big loans into smaller, hopefully lower interest grants. Big money from the global north, from these development finance institutions, can also help guarantee loans so that you don't compete with the local banks in the region. And so that a bit of blended financing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharonan. At this juncture, I would also like to read some of the questions from the attendees. We have a question on how harmful, taking an example of the withdrawal of Moderna from Kenya, how harmful is this for the African continent? And how do we prevent such scenarios from happening again? Professor Petro, would you like to take a stab at this?
Let me do that, but maybe before I answer, just circle back to the very great summary that Sharonan just given. I think if you, on your earlier question, the one answer that I think is there's so much funding available. There's a great strategy being put together by the African Union and African CDC to capacitate and enable the continent to produce the products we need. We need to implement that strategy. We need to do it in a careful, business-like manner and invest and utilize the resources that's available very, very wisely. I think we need to deliver on the strategy we've built. On Moderna, I can't speak for the country. Of course, we need these international partners, multilaterals, multinational companies to have a presence on the continent. I think that's part of the 3 models that I have mentioned earlier. Whether that the withdrawal of Moderna is a major crisis for the continent, I'm not sure. I don't think so. But I think the country Kenya had very great expectations to get access to technology from a very, very successful organization. But I think the principle is we need those partnerships in the continent in combination with our homegrown initiatives and our hybrids. But whether that particular withdrawal is the end of the world, I don't think so.
Thank you so much, Professor. I would like to direct this one to either Dr. Kagaba or Tom. There is a question regarding that Africans are actually not known to buy things made in Africa. How do we increase demand for vaccines that are actually made in Africa?
Yeah, that's a very that's a very big challenge, and I think, of course, work needs to be done by the rising and doing some vaccine research awareness. One of the reasons, of course, one of the biggest challenges is people not being aware and they're not trusting. But I think with a very good strategy to do vaccine literacy and educating our communities, we'll mitigate that. But I see, on the other hand, a very big challenge where we need some good cooperation between African countries. And I think one of the things also we're concerned with is the market and sustainability of the production. I think we have cases where some of the African countries are producing products, health products. But if you look at where they're exporting, it's very interesting. You find neighboring countries not exporting to the other countries because of lack of cooperation. So I think it really requires a lot of thinking on, of course, creating demand, which I expect the civil society to take a leading role on creating demand, raising awareness among our communities, but also ensuring that our countries are discussing. And I think if after COVID, what we've been seeing in the region is every country racing to start some vaccine production. I mean, eventually, if every country in the region starts some production of vaccine, it would also affect the market for the local production to be sustainable, and the countries that have invested and everyone to benefit. You need to ensure and guarantee the market. And I think there's also a conversation that needs to take place between our countries within Africa to say, if this vaccine is being produced by BioNTech in Rwanda, what should be produced? Is it something else in Kenya, so that you don't have people fighting for the same market, selling the same products? Because that also could be good. But of course, I believe that we, as the participants asked, there's a lot of investment that is needed to do literacy for people. I mean, you know how many challenges we had, a lot of challenges when we were trying to see people taking up COVID-19 vaccines. Up to now, there's still people have not believed. There's a lot of rumors about the vaccine and how they cause more health challenges to our bodies. So there's still a lot of education that's needed at community level, involving everyone. And that's why we think we need to see the civil society taking a leading role on creating demand, but also handling some of the misinformation that will come, while at the same time, we look at market sustainability and ensuring that countries are cooperating and agreeing to the uptake of the health products that will be produced. Yeah.
Maria, may I add something just to complement what Thomas just been outlined, and it's around quality. We must ensure as producers that we never compromise quality, that we have complete quality assurance for our people so that they trust the products we produce. I think that's just one contribution I want to add to Tom's. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Petro and Dr. Kagaba, for those very profound reflections. Tom, I would also like to direct a question for you from IPEC, Aaron. And he wants to know how we can ensure that the political economic context of whether it's Rwanda or Africa remains stable, so as not to disrupt pharmaceutical manufacturing. Any reflections on this?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's a question that might be quite hard for me, how to ensure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Yeah. Yes, how to ensure the political environment. The political environment.
Yes.
Yes, I think that question, it's a good question, but again, not quite simple for me. But I think most of the companies like BioNTech and others that go into such a market, I believe they do some ground intel and research on the political economy. In that they look at all ends to see if the environment does not with environment to allow them to function, and also look at the demand and supply side of it. But I think the question you're talking about again goes in line with what my colleague Aphrodis was talking about because we've had situations whereby even the IP rules intellectual property rules in each country, and having also legislation in one country or another, having a situation whereby even countries that are neighboring in terms of products, one cannot get another product from the other country. But I think the bigger question at large might be put at governments and the companies in general, that in order to be sustainable, in order to have sustainability and not closing, like what a colleague asked the question about Moderna, because I was reading the loss made by Moderna, I think in 2022, not 2021, the loss made. If there could be cooperation between countries, and if there could be, if they could involve actors at all spectrums, let's say, if BioNTech is working here in Africa, then you might need also to look at the other, in Rwanda, you might also look at the market elsewhere, and not only here in Rwanda, to see how to sustain the productivity. On the question of how to manage the political economy, I think this should be looked into. It's a factor that should be looked into even before the production begins. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. I would like to ask Antonio, as he gives his concluding remarks, what lessons can be drawn from initiatives such as AVMA and Gavi?
Yeah, that's indeed a good question. I think that we should ask ourselves in the first place, which kind of incentives are coming from such initiatives. So we're talking about the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator from Gavi, which is a new instrument to stimulate innovation. But the real question is this kind of instrument stimulating innovation in Africa or from African companies? So that's the big question, because I think that such initiatives are based, for example, this one, AVMA, is based on pull incentives. So it has a milestone payment for WHO pre-qualification, and then a price subsidy for linked to Gavi UNICEF tenders. So the point is that it is easier for European-based companies to have at-risk capital to invest for this kind of initiatives. So I do believe that there is a gap that needs to be filled, and this gap is filled only through push incentives in the form of grants to fund two areas, which are product development and regulatory approval dossier, because I think that these two areas are not easily accessible financially for many emerging African manufacturers. And so if the initiative is for African vaccine manufacturing, and if it's an accelerator for African vaccine manufacturing, then I think it's really important that we reflect on push incentives and not only on pull incentives. And we give access to at-risk capital for these two areas, product development, once again, and regulatory approval dossier, because otherwise we will incentivize just companies from the global north or already established company in Africa. So I think it's important to, if we want to stimulate innovation, to take this into account, because regulatory approval dossier is something that costs a lot for companies. And without this being available in terms of capital, I think there is no possibility of progressing in this field. Yeah, I think it's aligned also with what was established by the Africa CDC that asked Gavi to procure about 30% at least of vaccines from African manufacturers. So if we want to respect this commitment that has been made by Africa CDC, I think it's crucial that we also act consequently from the Gavi perspective, which is an international procurer and can help shape demand on such products and such processes. So yeah, I think that would be my answer to this question. And I think we are not running late, but almost. So I would maybe would like to, yes, indeed, thank you very much for all your reflection. I think that indeed what has been highlighted by all speakers has been really great, and I would like you to thank again Dr. Kagame and Dr. Mulisa for their contribution into the case study once again. And I leave it to Maria for a quick proper wrap up of the session. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for those very thoughtful reflections. As we come to a close, I would like to express my deep appreciation for the panelists. Thank you so much for your reflections. They have really been eye-opening. I'd also like to thank the attendees. Thank you so much for joining us and discussion of these reflections. As we say in Uganda, Mwiraba. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was nice to talk with you.
Thank you, Dr. Kagaba.